That card doesn't even look real. The words sliced through the air behind the marble counter like a serrated whisper, sharp, careless, and just loud enough to make heads turn. I remember the moment with excruciating clarity, even now, more than a year later. The room stilled for a fraction of a second, just long enough for embarrassment to curl in the pit of my stomach like a tightening fist. It was Samantha who said it. Blonde, polished, always just on the edge of smiling too hard. She was the senior front desk associate at the Avalon Grand, a title she wielded like a badge. I was just the intern. Third week on the job. I wasn't even allowed to check guests in on my own yet. The man standing in front of her didn't flinch. I don't think I'll ever forget that. The way he held himself, shoulders square, hands still, gaze steady like the eye of a storm. He was older, maybe in his mid-70s, but something about him made the whole lobby feel smaller, like he didn't belong in that space, not because he wasn't worthy of it, but because he'd already outgrown it. He'd slid a black metal card across the counter, slow and deliberate. The kind of card you don't see often unless you work at a place like the Avalon Grand, where rooms cost more per night than some people's monthly rent. Samantha picked it up like it was made of plastic. Tilted it back and forth under the light, as if trying to catch some flaw. Then she smirked. You know you need a real card for this hotel. Her tone wasn't just condescending. It was performative. I felt it then, the shift in the room. A man in a tailored navy blazer looked up from his laptop in the lounge. Two women near the fireplace stopped whispering and openly stared. I saw the doorman freeze with a guest's suitcase halfway to the elevator. Everyone had heard. Everyone was watching. And no one said a word. Not even me. I'd like to tell you I stepped forward. That I cleared my throat and said, "That's a Centurion card. It's real." Or that I pulled Samantha aside and told her to lower her voice, to be more professional. But I didn't. I stood there. Fingers fidgeting with the edge of my name badge, heart pounding. I felt ashamed, not of him, but of myself. The man gave a small nod, as if acknowledging something only he could see. Then, in a voice as smooth as bourbon and twice as aged, he said, "That is indeed my card. You're welcome to run it." Samantha's smirk faltered for a second, but she recovered fast. "Let me get my manager." It was protocol, she would later say. But everyone knew the truth. The truth was, she didn't believe a black man, even one dressed in a custom charcoal suit and camel hair coat, could afford a room at the Avalon Grand. Not one with silver hair and skin like deep bronze glass. Not one who didn't raise his voice, who didn't try to prove his worth. And certainly not one who handed her a card that symbolized the top 0.01% of wealth in the world. What she didn't know, what none of us knew, was that this man's name was Elijah Rowe. And in just 7 minutes, he would make $3.5 billion vanish from the market with a single phone call. It's strange, looking back. You expect revolutions to start with protests, raised fists, or breaking glass. You don't expect them to begin at a check-in desk on a Tuesday night, with snow falling gently outside. But that's how it started. It started with a pause. Elijah stepped away from the counter without another word. He didn't argue, didn't protest. He simply walked toward the tall windows near the lobby fireplace, pulled a phone from the inside pocket of his coat, and made a call. I remember every detail. The way he stood, one hand in his coat pocket, the other holding the phone to his ear. His posture was upright but relaxed, like he was watching time move slower than the rest of us. "James," he said, voice low. "It's Elijah." Pause. "Cancel the Roe W&B merger. Immediately." Pause. No discussion. "It's done." That was it. 3 sentences. And the world outside those lobby doors would never be the same. I didn't understand it at first. I mean, who could? Samantha had already moved on to the next guest, a younger man in designer sneakers and too much cologne. The manager, Philip Danvers, stood near the elevator, trying not to look rattled. And I was still staring at Elijah. The kind of stare that comes not from recognition, but from realization. My phone buzzed in my blazer pocket. I pulled it out and nearly dropped it. Breaking news, $3.5 billion merger cancelled. Elijah Rowe pulls out of Warren and Blake deal without warning. I blinked. Read it again. Elijah Rowe. The name meant nothing to me, yet. But in the minutes that followed, it would light up every financial terminal from New York to Tokyo. More alerts came in. Wall Street reacts to sudden exit of ghost investor. Who is Elijah Rowe? The billionaire who just disappeared $3.5 billion. The TV in the hotel bar switched from sports to Bloomberg. Analysts were scrambling, fingers pointing at screens. And all the while, the man they were talking about stood by the window, tucking his phone away, calm as ever. Samantha saw the alerts too. Her face drained of color. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She started to say something, probably an apology, maybe an excuse. But Elijah had already begun walking toward the door. I caught up with him just in time to see him press a folded $100 bill into Thomas the doorman's hand. "Stay warm out here," he said, voice kind. Thomas, eyes wide, stammered a thank you. "Will you need your car, sir?" Elijah shook his head. "No need. I think I'll walk." And just like that, he stepped into the night. I stood there, breath visible in the cold, watching him disappear into the snowfall. He didn't look back. Didn't wait for validation. Didn't demand justice. He became a justice. I went home that night shaking. I sat on the edge of my bed, the city lights flickering outside my window, and opened my laptop. I couldn't sleep. I typed his name into the search bar. And what I found wasn't just a man. It was a myth, half whispered in corporate circles, hidden behind shell companies, private trusts, and silent philanthropy. A man who had quietly funded over 100 black-owned businesses. Who never appeared on Forbes but had more influence than most of its list combined. A man who built quietly, so that others could rise loudly. And I, a 23-year-old intern who didn't even speak up when he was humiliated, I had just watched him dismantle one of the most powerful investment deals in America. Without yelling. Without suing. Without so much as raising his voice. I opened a blank document and began to type. The billionaire you laughed at. It was meant to be just a reflection. A confession, maybe. Something I needed to get off my chest. But that story, my story, took on a life of its own. And it was only the beginning. Because sometimes, the loudest revolutions don't start with a bang. Sometimes, they start with a whisper, from the back of a lobby. From someone like me. They say the market hates surprises. But that night, Elijah Rowe didn't just surprise the market, he made it flinch. By the time I got home from my shift at the Avalon Grand, the snow had thickened into a quiet white blanket, muffling the sounds of the city. But inside my apartment, the silence was shattered by alert after alert. My phone screen lit up with financial news apps, breaking headlines, and push notifications that blurred together like ticker tape in my mind. Rowe cancels WNB deal in shock phone call. $3.5 billion gone in 17 minutes. Who is Elijah Rowe? The ghost billionaire just stepped into the light. Ghost billionaire. That phrase struck me more than anything else. I had never heard of Elijah Rowe before that night, Not in any of my hospitality training, not in business school, not even in the endless corporate orientation videos we were required to watch on day one. Some names got thrown around all the time: Bezos, Buffett, Gates. But Roe. Nothing. And yet here he was, trending globally. I sat on the edge of my bed in my tiny studio, my coat still on, cheeks still stinging from the cold, heart still thudding from what I'd witnessed. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. And I wrote. The Billionaire You Laughed At. That was the title I gave it. I didn't name the hotel. I didn't even include my own name. I was still too afraid of losing my internship, of getting sued, of being told that what I saw wasn't real. But I wrote it anyway. I wrote about how he stood there, humiliated but composed. How he never raised his voice. How the room shifted around him, like we were all puppets in a play he'd already written. I wrote about Samantha's sneer, Philip's empty professionalism, and my silence, the kind that shamed me more than any mistake I could have made. And then I wrote about the call. The call that pulled $3.5 billion out of the air like a magician yanking a coin from behind your ear, except this was no trick. This was power. Quiet. Strategic. Absolute. I hit publish. And for a few hours, nothing happened. Then everything happened. I woke up at 6:12 a.m. to over 200 notifications. My anonymous blog post had been shared over 3,000 times. By 7:30 a.m., it had crossed 10,000. And by 9 a.m., someone on Twitter had figured out what hotel I was talking about, even without me naming it. The comments started rolling in. This is what everyday racism looks like. Hidden in smiles and suits. This man didn't just check out, he took the whole damn building with him. Who is this intern? She saw it. She saw it. And she told the truth. That part stuck with me. Because the truth was, I almost didn't. I almost went home, shut my mouth, and chalked it up to another uncomfortable moment. I was raised to believe that if you want to keep your job, you don't stir the pot. You smile. You keep your head down. You don't call out your superiors. But something about Elijah Rowe had cracked something open in me. The way he held himself. The way he walked out into the snow like he wasn't angry, just disappointed in the world's smallness. I had felt that smallness too many times to ignore it when I saw it inflicted on someone else. And now, the world was listening. At 10:43 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A private number. I hesitated, then answered. Miss Richardson, the voice on the other end asked. Female. Smooth. Professional. This is. Chloe, I said slowly. I read your piece. My heart jumped. Who is this? My name is Leah Warren. I sat bolt upright. Warren. As in Warren and Blake. My father is Gareth Blake, she said after a pause. CEO of the company, Elijah, just cost $3.5 billion. I didn't speak. I'd like to meet, she said. I think you saw something important. Something the world needs to understand more clearly. And I think you and I might be on the same side. We met later that day in a coffee shop tucked between a bookstore and a florist on the north side. She wore a tailored gray coat, minimal makeup, and a scarf that looked like it cost more than my rent. But her posture wasn't arrogant. It was careful. She extended a hand. I took it. Her grip was firm, but her fingers were cold. I read your post 3 times, she said, stirring her tea without drinking it. You told it exactly the way it happened. You were there. No. But I know the pattern. I blinked. What do you mean? She pulled out a tablet, tapped the screen, and turned it toward me. A spreadsheet. Dozens of rows. Warren and Blake acquisition targets, she said. Over the last 10 years. The majority of them founded by Black or Latino entrepreneurs. Most of them gone within 18 months of acquisition. She scrolled. Technology absorbed. Founders pushed out. Missions erased. She paused and looked me straight in the eye. Now they're targeting Elijah Rowe's inner circle. And that includes his godson, David Jackson. The name didn't register at first. But the way she said it, it felt like a chess move. Leah explained that David Jackson was the founder of a rising fintech startup called TechSoil, focused on banking access in underserved communities. She showed me his growth numbers, user stats, and pilot programs. It was impressive, especially for someone who, by all appearances, was trying to do real good. He's about to receive a funding offer from my father's firm, Leah said. But that offer comes with a hidden cost. The same one Elijah once saw and avoided. But David doesn't know what happened. Not yet. So tell him, I said. Warn him. I'm too close. If it comes from me, he'll think it's sabotage. But he needs to know the truth before he signs anything. There was a long silence. The kind where you feel the future hanging on your next breath. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Because you saw what the world didn't, she said softly. And you had the courage to name it. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay awake thinking about Elijah. About how one act of dignity had become a ripple that was now threatening to swallow one of the most powerful financial firms in the country. And I kept thinking about David. Somewhere, he was probably celebrating a potential investment. Unaware that he wasn't being funded, he was being hunted. I looked out the window. Snow still clung to the corners of the rooftops, though the sky was clear. I imagined Elijah walking those streets, hands in his coat pockets, alone in the cold. And I realized something. It wasn't just about a man. It was about every man who had ever been overlooked because of the color of his skin. It was about every woman who had ever stayed silent because she didn't think her voice mattered. And it was about what we did, now, with the truth. The next day, I went back to work. Samantha avoided eye contact. Philip kept his door closed all morning. But the lobby buzzed differently now. Guests whispered. Staff typed a little more cautiously. Something had changed. I walked past the front desk and toward the elevators. But instead of heading to the HR office as scheduled, I veered left, toward the break room. I found Thomas, the doorman, sitting alone with a cup of coffee. You were kind to him, I said. Thomas looked up. His face creased with worry. They're saying we'll all be reviewed. That heads are gonna roll. Maybe they should, I replied. But not yours. He looked down into his coffee. He gave me $100 tip. And I almost didn't open that door in time. I hesitated. So did I said. But we're not done yet. I left him there, deep in thought, and made a promise to myself. I would write again. This time with names. This time with documents. This time with a purpose. By Friday, the billionaire you laughed at had reached 85,000 shares. By Sunday, 3 journalists contacted me for interviews. By Monday, I had a meeting scheduled with a legal advocacy group offering pro bono support in case of retaliation. And that night, I received another message from Leah. They've moved up the meeting with David to Aspen this weekend. It's happening fast. We need to act faster. I didn't hesitate this time. They called him the ghost billionaire. But to me, he was the first man I ever saw dismantle a system, with nothing but grace. That weekend, I didn't go out. I didn't meet friends. I didn't return the 5 missed calls from my mother, who had seen my anonymous blog post reposted by a national news page and had recognized the cadence in the writing. Instead, I locked myself in my apartment with a half-eaten bagel, 3 cups of coffee, and every piece of information I could find about Elijah Rowe. And that's when I realized how deliberate his invisibility had been. No Wikipedia page. No glossy interviews. No red carpet appearances. Not even a verified social media account. In an age where billionaires announce breakfast plans on Twitter and feud in press releases, Elijah had managed to remain almost entirely offline. But the pieces were there, scattered like breadcrumbs for those who knew how to look. Old property records. Silent partnerships. Anonymous donations to historically black colleges. A quiet acquisition of a bankrupt manufacturing firm in 1994 that saved 2,000 jobs in Birmingham, Alabama, was filed under a trust company named ER Legacy Holdings. ER Elijah Rowe. The deeper I dug, the more the picture formed, not a man chasing wealth, but one using it as a tool. A hammer, sometimes. A shield, mostly. A rope, always, to pull others up. And then, I found a name. Chen's Books. It was an old blog post, long archived, written by a woman named Ava Johnson, who described a pivotal moment in her career. A visit to a tiny bookstore in Chicago's Chinatown, where a quiet man introduced her to the fundamentals of capital strategy. She never named him directly, but she did refer to him as her first real investor, the one who asked for nothing in return but honesty and discipline. The post ended with a line that caught in my throat. He used to say, "Power is quiet when it's real." That was it. That was Elijah. I sat back, overwhelmed. The lights from the city blurred through my apartment window like the static on an old television set. Outside, Chicago snow had hardened into glassy patches along the sidewalks. But all I could think about was my grandfather. My grandfather's name was Henry Richardson. He was born in the South, raised in the North, and spent most of his life fixing other people's cars in a garage that never had working heat. He used to come home with oil-stained fingers and a sunburn on the back of his neck from standing outside too long. He never went to college. Never made it past the 8th grade, actually. But he was the smartest man I knew. When I was 10, he gave me a pocket journal and told me to write down everything I learned, even if no one else cared to read it. They don't have to see your genius for it to be real, he told me. Just don't let him convince you it isn't there. He died before I graduated from high school. The heart gave out. No warning. We couldn't afford a big funeral. But I remember the crowd that came. Old customers. Mechanics from across the city. One man showed up from out of state just to say, "Henry once lent me $50 and said, 'Get your first tool. Pay me back when you're proud.'" He never asked for the money again. That's what Elijah reminded me of. A man who made power feel less like a wall and more like a doorframe. Something you could pass through. Something you could build under. And here he was, finally being seen. Not in the way most people would have chosen, no Forbes cover or gala toast. Just a headline, $3.5 billion deal destroyed after racist snub. And in the background of that explosion, a man with silver hair was walking away through the snow. I closed my laptop. It was past midnight. But I couldn't sleep. Instead, I took out the pocket journal my grandfather gave me, the one I still kept in my nightstand drawer, leather soft with age. I hadn't written in it in over a year. But that night, I turned to a blank page and wrote. I saw something powerful today. Not loud. Not proud. But unshakable. The next morning, I received an unexpected email. Subject, your post. From Ava Johnson. Message. Chloe. I read your story. I was one of Elijah's students once. If you want to understand the man you wrote about, I think we should talk. I'll be in Chicago tomorrow. Meet me. There was an address. No title. No pressure. Just a name. We met at a diner near Roosevelt and Canal. The kind of place with cracked leather booths and waitresses who called you sweetheart, no matter your age. Ava arrived in a burgundy pantsuit and glasses that gave her the air of a tenured professor. But she carried herself like someone who had climbed uphill in heels before, one hand on the railing, the other carrying someone else. I'm impressed, she said, sliding into the booth. Not many people have the nerve to speak up, especially when they're not even the ones being targeted. I stirred my coffee. I didn't do enough. She raised an eyebrow. You told the story. That's more than most. I nodded, unsure of what to say. Ava leaned in. Let me tell you something about Elijah. And she did. She told me about the first time she met him, how she'd pitched a microfinance project in a room full of disinterested investors. Elijah had sat in the back, silent, scribbling notes. After the meeting, while everyone else shook hands and walked away, he asked her one question. Do you believe what you just said, or did you just learn how to say it well? That question changed everything. He funded her. Quietly. Without fanfare. He gave her more than money, he gave her permission. Not to imitate others, but to trust her instincts. And when the funding ran out and the first version of her firm failed, he didn't pull away. He told me, failure is proof you tried. I can't back someone who never bleeds. Ava looked at me then, eyes sharp behind her glasses. Elijah's been building an alternative network for years, black-owned firms, female-led funds, community banks. Most people didn't notice because he never wanted credit. But now, with what happened at the hotel, he's been exposed, I finished. She nodded. And they'll come after him harder now. They already are. I leaned forward. Who is they? Warren and Blake. Other firms like them. Institutions that built empires on acquisition and erasure. The moment you humiliate someone like Gareth Blake publicly, you trigger retaliation. I sat back. The weight of it landed on my shoulders like winter snow. Do you think Elijah knew that when he made the call? Ava smiled, almost sadly. Elijah always knew. He just decided the moment had come. He was done being a ghost. Later that night, I stood at my window again, looking out over the quiet streets. Cars moved below like lazy beetles, their headlights soft in the snow. I thought about the chain reaction. One man was disrespected. One call made. One blog post written. And now, alliances forming, documents surfacing, people waking up. I had never imagined myself part of something this big. I was just the intern, remember? But now I saw it clearly, change doesn't ask for permission. It walks in wearing a wool coat and Italian shoes, hands you a business card, and waits to see if you'll blink. Before I went to sleep, I wrote another journal entry. Sometimes the people we think are invisible are the ones who've been watching longest. Sometimes the strongest hands are the ones that never had the luxury of pointing. I slept deeply that night. And when I woke, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be a bystander anymore. If someone had told me, even a week earlier, that I'd be sitting in a quiet cafe across from the daughter of the man whose empire Elijah Rowe had just detonated, I would have laughed. Or choked on my coffee. Or both. But there I was, facing Leah Warren, the woman who, by blood and name, had every reason to hate me, and every reason to walk away. She didn't. The cafe we chose wasn't far from the university, intentionally so, I suspected. It was the kind of place where people met for office hours or to revise research papers. The hum of espresso machines and polite conversation created just enough noise to make our meeting unremarkable. But everything about it was extraordinary. Leah Warren looked nothing like I expected. No jewelry. No heels. No power suit. Just dark jeans, a pale gray coat, and a low ponytail. She could have passed for any working professional in Chicago, except for the way she carried herself. Her posture was perfect. Not stiff, precise. Every move calculated, yet effortless. Like someone who had been trained, coached, and observed from birth to manage perception. She reached across the table, and I hesitated. "I'm not here on my father's behalf," she said before I could speak. "If he knew I was meeting you, well, let's just say I'd be off the Christmas card list permanently." I took her hand. It was cold, steady, and surprisingly gentle. "I read your blog post 5 times, she said, wrapping her fingers around a steaming mug of chamomile tea. "At first, I thought it was just a well-written piece of outrage. Emotional. Timely. Then I realized it wasn't emotional, it was precise. It had weight. Because you were there." I didn't know how to respond, so I said what felt honest. "I didn't do anything heroic. I watched something happen. Then I wrote it down." She nodded slowly. "That's more than most people do. You saw what my company, my family, has been doing for years. And you dared to call it out." I frowned. "Your company," I repeated. "You're part of it." "My last name says yes," she replied. "But my conscience says something else entirely." That was the moment I saw it, the fracture. Not in her words, but in her eyes. A barely perceptible flicker of tension every time she said, "my father," or, "the company." Like a crack in a marble statue, subtle but deep. "I've worked in WNB's Strategic Development Division for 6 years, she continued. "On paper, I help evaluate new markets and innovations. But in reality, I've been watching us dismantle more startups than we build." She paused. "And the pattern is clear." She pulled out a tablet and laid it flat on the table between us. Dozens of rows. Company names. Dates. Demographics. 87 acquisitions in the last 12 years, she said. 62 was founded by people of color. 51 no longer exist in their original form. I blinked. "That can't be accidental." "It's not," she said flatly. "It's strategic." She leaned back in her chair, letting me absorb the data. "My father doesn't believe in equity," she said. "He believes in efficiency. He buys intellectual property, strips the human element, and monetizes the rest. The founder's vision? Disposable." "And what about you?" I asked quietly. "How did you last this long in that system?" She looked down into her tea. For the first time, she seemed unsure of herself. "Because I kept telling myself I could change it from within. That maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to slow the machine down. Reshape a few outcomes. Protect a few people." She looked up, and for the first time, I saw it, the cost. But then Elijah happened. I nodded. The air between us shifted. We weren't opponents anymore. We were witnesses, 2 women who had seen the system from opposite ends and found ourselves horrified by the same truths. "I need your help," she said softly. "Not for me, for someone else. Someone the machine is targeting next." "David Jackson," I said before she could. Her eyebrows lifted. You already know. I showed her my phone. My ongoing research on Elijah. The connections I'd found. The story Ava Johnson had told me. The blog post I was already drafting but hadn't published yet. WNB is going after David, I said. And they're doing it to send a message to Elijah. Leah nodded. And if David says yes, signs the offer, it'll be the beginning of the end. Not just for his company. For everything Elijah's been building. There was a pause. Does David know who he's dealing with? I asked. Not yet, Leah replied. He knows my father by reputation, generous funder, strong connections, fast-tracks growth. He doesn't see the wolf under the lambskin. So why doesn't Elijah warn him? Because David doesn't want to be rescued. That answer surprised me. Leah explained, David grew up close to Elijah but always resisted his shadow. He wanted to build something of his own. Refused help. Refused investment. Even refused to use Elijah's last name in business spaces. He wants to win on his terms. My breath caught. Like me, I said. Leah smiled faintly. Like a lot of us. That afternoon, we stayed in a cafe for nearly 3 hours. We talked not just about David or Elijah, but about what it meant to be the next generation in a system built by the last. We talked about the compromises we'd made, the truths we'd ignored, the silences we'd allowed. And somewhere between our third refill of coffee and the last bites of a shared lemon tart, a strange and quiet alliance formed. Not a partnership. Not yet. But a decision. To stop pretending we were too small to matter. Later that night, I walked home alone. The Chicago wind had picked up, slipping between the buildings like a thief. I tightened my coat and pulled my scarf higher, but the chill reached me anyway. And still, I felt more awake than I had in years. I thought about Leah. A woman born into power who could have chosen silence and luxury. But instead, she was walking a tightrope over her family legacy, trying to undo harm from the inside. And I thought about Elijah. A man who could have destroyed WNB publicly, years ago, but waited. Waited for the right moment. The right team. Maybe even, the right witnesses. When I reached home, I found a brown envelope taped to my door. No name. No return address. Inside was a USB drive. And a note. You'll know what to do. L. I plugged it into my laptop. It was a video file, grainy, but clear enough. The camera appeared to be hidden in a conference room. On screen, I saw Gareth Blake, CEO of WNB. And beside him, Tanner Wilson, the man Leah had warned me about, the real orchestrator behind most of their acquisitions. They were speaking candidly. Laughing. David Jackson has no idea what's in the clause, Gareth said. We'll extract the tech, spin it off in 18 months, and call it a pivot, Tanner added. And it sends a clear message to Elijah, Gareth smirked. You humiliate me in public. I erase your legacy in private. I sat frozen, fingers trembling. I had seen injustice before. I had written about it, read about it, felt it in passing moments and quiet stings. But this was premeditated, recorded, intentional harm. And now, I hold it in my hands. I stared at the screen for a long time. The cursor was blinking like a heartbeat. Then I opened my blog dashboard. I uploaded the video, embedded it in my draft, and wrote 2 lines at the top. They laughed when he walked out of the hotel. But here's what they said when they thought no one was listening. I hit save. Not published, not yet. But I would. I just needed one more signal. One more confirmation. Because once it went live, there'd be no going back. No hiding. No pretending I was just the intern. The next morning, I received a text. From a blocked number. Only 2 words. Do it. I didn't sleep the night I received that message. Do it. Just 2 words, from a blocked number. I knew it was Leia. And I knew what she meant. She had taken the risk. Handed me the video. Trusted me with a moment that could bring her father down. And now she was permitting me to burn the bridge. But still, I hesitated. Because publishing that video wouldn't just make headlines. It would start a fire. A fire I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. At 6:03 a.m., I made a call. The person who picked up didn't say hello. I wondered when you'd call, said the voice. It was Ava Johnson. Do you know about the video? I asked. There was a pause. I do now. I don't want to hurt David, I said. He hasn't signed yet. But if I wait too long. He will, Ava said gently. Because he doesn't see the trap yet. I want him to make the right decision. Not because I scared him, but because he sees it. Then maybe, she replied, he needs to hear it from someone who saw what happened before the camera was rolling. 3 hours later, I stood outside the downtown offices of Tech Oil Innovations. Ava met me in the lobby, her sharp heels clicking with quiet authority. I had changed twice before coming, eventually settling on my most neutral outfit, black slacks, a gray blouse, and the thinnest layer of courage I could summon. Inside, the office buzzed with the kind of nervous energy you only feel before something big happens. Coders in corner cubicles. Designers clustered around a prototype sketch. A wall of screens showed growth metrics, user data, and live maps. It looked like the future. It sounded like hope. And in the center of it all was David Jackson. He looked younger than I expected. Not because of his face, but because of his eyes. Eyes that had seen struggle but still believed. Eyes that hadn't been broken by the system. Not yet. He stood beside a whiteboard covered in wireframe sketches, deep in conversation with his co-founder, Marcus. But when Ava led me toward him, he paused. His brow furrowed. "You're the blogger," he said, eyes narrowing. I felt myself shrink a little. I prefer the word writer. But yes. I'm Chloe. He didn't offer his hand. I read your post, he said. Then I read your second one. The one about the acquisition patterns. That was dangerous. It was true, I replied. I didn't say it wasn't. Ava intervened. David, we need to talk. All of us. In private. He glanced at his watch. I have a call with Tanner Wilson at noon. We're finalizing the draft term sheet. If this is some kind of stall tactic. It's not, Ava said sharply. But if you take that call without seeing what we brought, you won't be negotiating. You'll be surrendering. That got his attention. 10 minutes later, we were in a glass-walled conference room on the top floor. David sat at the head of the table. Ava to his right. I sat across from him, with my laptop open and hands folded like I was holding onto the table for balance. I showed him the video. He didn't blink. Didn't speak. He watched Gareth and Tanner laugh, watched them say his name, watched them dissect his life's work like it was scrap metal for parts. And then he sat back, eyes hollow. A full minute passed in silence. Then another. I thought I was getting a seat at the table, he finally said. Turns out I was the main course. He looked at me, for the first time. How did you get this? Leia, I said. You're a would-be investor's daughter. And why give it to you? Because she's done being quiet, I said. And so am I. David rubbed his forehead. He looked tired. Not just from work, but from the weight of a decision he hadn't fully understood until now. They offered us $50 million, he said quietly. 45% equity. Immediate expansion. Global scale within 2 years. It's everything we dreamed of. And you'd own none of it in 18 months, Ava said. He didn't argue. She's right, he whispered. I knew something felt off. But I wanted it to be real so badly. I didn't want to ask too many questions. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. I recognized that feeling. It's the feeling of being offered a miracle and wondering if refusing it means you'll never get another. I didn't want to take Elijah's money, David said. Not because I don't respect him. But because I wanted this to be mine. Something I built without leaning on someone else's legacy. It still can be, Ava said softly. But if I walk away now, what happens next? Do I become the guy who turned down $50 million? Does WNB blacklist us from every other investor circle? Maybe, I said honestly. But maybe that's the price of keeping your soul intact. He looked down. Do you believe that? He asked. I do now, I said. Because I watched a man lose his dignity in public, and never raise his voice. And I watched a company fall apart because it finally underestimated the wrong man. By the time we left the conference room, the call with Tanner had come and gone. David never picked up. Instead, he called Marcus into the room, showed him the video, and said, "We're not signing." The fallout came fast. By that evening, TechOil received an official withdrawal letter from Warren and Blake. Buried in the legal jargon was a line about reallocation of capital due to strategic realignment, code 4, "You crossed us." But David didn't flinch. Neither did Marcus. And neither did I. That night, I published the video. It went viral in under 2 hours. The headlines wrote themselves. WNB execs caught on tape plotting tech grab. Startup founder rejects $50 million after racist smear uncovered. Blog post turned bombshell, intern who brought Wall Street to its knees. They didn't get everything right. I was never trying to bring anyone to their knees. I just wanted someone to see what I saw. And now, they had. But then came the letters. Legal threats. Takedown notices. Cease emails. First, from anonymous lawyers. Then, unmistakably, from WNB's counsel. I forwarded every one of them to Ava. Let them come, she said. We've got lawyers too. But it wasn't the emails that scared me. It was the knock at my door. 2 nights later. 10:47 p.m. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 men in plain black jackets. No badges. No greetings. Just silence. I didn't open the door. Instead, I packed a bag, grabbed my laptop, and left out the fire escape. Leia had warned me, if you go public, they'll try to scare you first. Then they'll try to erase you. I wasn't going to give them the chance. I stayed with Ava for the next 3 nights. Her apartment was modest but safe. She made tea every morning, played jazz in the evenings, and let me sleep on her couch without asking too many questions. I've been in your shoes, she said once, handing me a blanket. You survive the moment. Then you decide what you want to build from it. On the 4th day, David called. We've had 3 offers in 2 days, he said. From black-led VC firms. From mission-aligned investors. None of them asked to own us. They just want to back us. I smiled for the first time in days. That's what happens when you tell the truth, I said. You find people who recognize it. And Leia, he added, wants to talk to you. She's ready. Ready for what? To go public. I never imagined that the road to justice would pass through a ski resort. But Aspen, Colorado, blanketed in fresh powder and insulated wealth, was about to become the stage for one of the most delicate confrontations of David Jackson's life. And I was about to watch it unfold from 1,100 miles away, staring at a grainy live stream from a hidden camera buried in the stitching of a jacket. I should have been more nervous. But by then, nerves were a luxury. 3 days before the retreat, David decided to go. Not to accept WNB's offer, he'd already rejected that. But to see them, face to face. On their turf. In their comfort zone. With the game tilted in their favor. I want to look Gareth in the eye, he told Ava and me during a call. I want to hear how far he'll go to pretend nothing's wrong. I didn't ask if he was afraid. I could see it. But underneath the fear was something stronger, resolve. We didn't go in blind. Leia had arranged everything. She provided David with a jacket modified by a security specialist in her circle. The interior lining held a micro camera, capable of transmitting audio and video in real time to an encrypted server. We'll be watching, she told him. You're not alone. Still, as the snow fell outside his suite at the Grand Aspen Villas and the fire crackled in his room, David was very much alone. Day 1 of the retreat looked like a luxury brochure. Gourmet breakfast on a terrace overlooking the Rockies. Snowmobile tours. Private fireside chats with venture capitalists whose watches cost more than my apartment. WNB had brought in a curated list of 20 founders. Most were black or brown. All were brilliant. No one knew what was coming. It was charm in its most dangerous form, weaponized warmth. On the live stream, I watched David move through it all with quiet grace. Smiling politely. Nodding thoughtfully. Laughing at the appropriate moments. But I knew that laugh. I had seen it in the mirror. It was the laugh we used to buy ourselves time. The laugh we wore when we weren't sure we were safe. Dinner was where things shifted. The second evening. A private dining room in the retreat's main lodge. 25 seats. White linen. Handwritten name cards. A view of the mountains that looked like a movie still. Gareth Blake entered last. Tan. Fit. Charismatic in that forced way of someone who practiced facial expressions in the mirror. He greeted each guest like a politician on a campaign trail. When he reached David, he placed both hands on his shoulders like an uncle at a wedding. David Jackson, he boomed. The man with the mission. David smiled, but not with his eyes. I appreciate the invitation, Mr. Blake. Gareth, please, he said. Tonight, we're all family. Ava, watching from my apartment beside me, made a noise in her throat that sounded a lot like choking on irony. The dinner began with small talk. Then a toast. Gareth raised his glass of red wine. To legacy, he said. And to the builders brave enough to shape the future. Cameras flashed. Applause followed. And then, the pitch. Tanner Wilson, always the wolf in Armani, stood and presented a deck projected on the wall. It was smooth, clean, and visually stunning. Market size. User growth. Exit projections. He painted a future in which tech oil was worth $2 billion in under 3 years, with WNB's help. I watched David closely on the live stream. His face didn't change. Then came the terms. Preferred shares. Strategic board placement. Technology licensing. To someone outside the industry, it sounded generous. To us, it was poison dipped in honey. I saw David's hands tense slightly. One thumb rubbed against the side of his glass. That was the tell. He was bracing for the next act. And it came. Gareth stood again, holding a leather portfolio. Inside, we knew, was the revised offer, the one they hoped David would sign that weekend. They wanted him to say yes in Aspen, where the snow and charm could bury his instincts. But David didn't reach for the folder. Instead, he spoke. "Before I look at anything," he said, voice even, "I'd like to understand what happened in Chicago." The room quieted. Tanner's smile didn't waver, but his eyes flicked quickly to Gareth. "I'm not sure I follow," Gareth said, chuckling softly. David leaned forward. "A black man tried to check into a hotel. He was mocked. Turned away. Hours later, $3.5 billion disappeared from your company's books. I'd like to know how those events connect." The silence turned sharp. This wasn't on the agenda. Tanner cleared his throat. "David, you've been misinformed. That event had nothing to do with—" "I've seen the footage," David said, interrupting. "And I've heard the audio from your boardroom. About me. About my company. About Elijah Rowe." And then, he reached into his jacket. A click. He placed a small, black USB on the table. "In case you forgot what you said." Gareth's face froze. The entire room sat motionless. And for a long, long moment, no one spoke. Leia had coached him for this. If they bluff, call it. If they lie, expose it. But if they stay silent, you've already won. David stood. "I came to Aspen to see how far you'd go to pretend your offer was clean. Now I know." He turned to the other founders in the room. "They'll say this was a misunderstanding. A personal vendetta. But it's not. This is a pattern. And they wanted me to be the next link in their chain." He picked up the USB. "You don't get to buy my silence." Then he walked out. The camera feed cut at the door. Ava and I sat in stunned silence. My hands were shaking. "That," she whispered, "wasn't just bravery." "No," I said. "That was legacy." Within 24 hours, the fallout began. Several of the founders who attended the retreat reached out to David privately. They'd seen enough. Heard enough. And now, they had questions. Leia, from her secure location, confirmed the damage internally. Gareth's leadership was in question. Tanner had gone quiet. Legal counsel was in panic mode. The video was making its way into media channels. And then, a miracle. One of the attendees had filmed the entire dinner. Secretly. Their insurance. They sent it to Leia. Then to me. The footage was better than we hoped. Not just David's speech, but Gareth's face. Tanner's discomfort. The stunned silence of witnesses who'd been complicit through ignorance. It was proof, not just of corruption, but of conscience. I posted it at midnight. And by morning, it was front-page news. Founder turns down WNB live at Aspen Retreat, cites racism, exploitation. David Jackson walks away from $50 million, walks into history. Power doesn't always yell. Sometimes it just leaves the room. The last headline made me cry. Because that's what Elijah had done. And now David had done the same. In the days that followed, something shifted. Not just in the headlines. Not just in the boardrooms. But in us. Founders began reaching out to Ava's firm. Young journalists asked me to train them in narrative accountability. Even TechOil's users, everyday folks, started sharing stories of what the app meant to their lives. It wasn't just fintech anymore. It was a movement. One afternoon, I received a message from Elijah. Not a call. Not a visit. Just an envelope. Inside, a simple note, handwritten. Power is quiet when it's real. You made it loud only when it had to be. Thank you. ER. I held that note to my chest for a long time. And for the first time since this began, I let myself cry. Not from fear. But from something deeper. Pride. They built it like a fortress. Brick by legal brick. Clause by hidden clause. Layered in paperwork, wrapped in jargon, guarded by lawyers trained to bend truth into contract language. Warren and Blake were never supposed to fall. But now, it was hemorrhaging. And the walls were starting to crack. The video from Aspen didn't just go viral. It tore open a vein. Every word David spoke. Every flicker of guilt on Gareth's face. Every document leaked by Leia, and every sentence I'd written in the months leading up to it, it all fed into a momentum too strong to stop. Reporters swarmed WNB's New York headquarters. Regulators reopened closed files. Former employees reached out to investigative journalists, and to me. Within a week, the SEC launched an inquiry into WNB's acquisition practices. 2 days later, a coalition of former founders filed a class action lawsuit, citing targeted predatory acquisition and systematic discrimination. I'd seen movements rise before, brief flames that sparked and vanished in the winds of short attention spans. But this was different. This wasn't a spark. It was a reckoning. And at the heart of it stood Leia Warren. The daughter of the empire. The unexpected insurgent. She had been silent for weeks, working quietly, feeding encrypted files to attorneys, coordinating testimonies from ex-employees, and ensuring that each document reached the right hands at the right time. But eventually, the silence ended. One morning, my phone lit up with a live stream alert. Leia Warren speaks, statement on the WNB scandal. I watched it from my apartment, still wrapped in a blanket, knees pulled to my chest like a child bracing for a storm. She stood at a podium in a modest blazer, no jewelry, hair pulled back tight. There were no PR handlers behind her. No corporate logos. Just the truth. My name is Leia Warren. I've worked at Warren and Blake for 9 years. I am the daughter of Gareth Blake. I was raised in rooms that rewarded silence. Trained to believe that efficiency mattered more than equity. That innovation could be owned. That profit excused exploitation. But I've seen the cost. I've seen what we destroyed to feed what we built. And I can't be silent anymore. She didn't cry. She didn't grandstand. She just told the truth, with surgical precision and steady eyes. She named the patterns. The policies. The boardroom jokes. The strategy behind targeting minority-founded startups is with limited legal counsel and minimal leverage. And then she said the words that, to me, changed everything. We didn't just acquire companies. We erased people. I watched the news anchors go silent after her broadcast. Commentators paused, visibly shaken. She had stepped into the center of the fire, and she didn't burn. That afternoon, a headline swept the business world. Board names Leia Warren interim CEO amid federal investigation. Gareth had been removed. Not quietly. Not amicably. But publicly, and with internal votes leaked to the press. Word spread that it wasn't just because of the scandals, or the lawsuits, or the markets panicking. It was because Leia had built a better plan. I met her in person a week later. Not in a high-rise or a news studio, but at a bookstore. Chen's Books, to be exact. Reopened by David with help from Ava and Elijah's estate, the building had been transformed into a community hub, a center for business literacy, entrepreneurial mentorship, and real education. A place where success began not with capital, but with context. Leia arrived wearing the same blazer from her live stream. No entourage. No assistant. Just a leather-bound notebook and the kind of eyes that had seen boardrooms crack open. "I wasn't sure you'd come," I said. "I promised Elijah," she replied. "Even if he didn't ask." We sat near the back, between shelves of economics texts and memoirs of trailblazers forgotten by the institutions that now scrambled to quote them. "I watched your speech," I said quietly. "You didn't just blow the whistle. You brought the whole machine to a halt." She shook her head. "No. The machine's still running. But now, at least, the gears are visible." She told me about the weeks ahead. She was restructuring the board. Auditing every acquisition from the last 15 years. Setting up an external ethics review panel. And creating a mandatory equity clause in all future deals, ensuring that no founder would lose control without informed, independent counsel. "They're calling it cosmetic," she said with a half smile. "But I don't care what they call it. If the result is justice, I can live with the name." I asked the question I had held in since she first reached out to me. "Why did you do it, Leia? Why risk everything?" She looked at me. And for the first time, I saw the girl behind the woman. Not the strategist. Not the heir. Just a daughter. "My mother," she said, voice softening. "She was brilliant. She built a tech company in the late 90s. Sold it too early. My father promised her the next venture would be theirs together." Her jaw tightened. "But when WNB took off, she was erased from the narrative. Not just left behind, written out." She looked down. "I learned early how power redefines truth. How it paints over the hands that built it. I told myself I would climb the ranks so that I could fix it from the top." She exhaled. "But I didn't expect to lose so much of myself getting there." I placed my hand over hers. "You didn't lose anything," I said. "You just passed through the fire." Back in New York, the empire continued to crumble. The SEC filed charges against Tanner Wilson, citing obstruction and document tampering. Federal investigators froze 3 pending WNB acquisitions. A class action suit, backed by 127 plaintiffs, moved forward in court, with Leia testifying for the plaintiffs, not against them. Gareth Blake disappeared from public view. Rumors swirled, offshore accounts, sealed settlements, quiet threats. But it didn't matter anymore. The fortress had fallen. And we were already building something new in its place. One morning, I walked into Chen's Books and found a package waiting for me at the counter. Inside, a simple pendant, etched with the initials ER. And a card. To the one who wrote it down. "Keep writing. There are more walls to name before they fall. A friend." I wore it every day. Not because I needed a reminder. But because I had finally understood something that Elijah, Leia, Ava, and David had all shown me in their way. Power isn't what they tell you it is. It's not a seat at the table. It's not a private jet. It's not a billion-dollar exit or a tech IPO. It's true. And the courage to say it out loud, before the world is ready to hear it. We had one more chapter to write. But this time, it wouldn't be a takedown. It would be a launch. A beginning. Because where empires fall, movements rise. I still remember the first time I saw Elijah Rowe. Not in person. On a blurry hotel camera. Standing alone. Dignified. Not shouting. Not accusing. Just walking away. And I remember what the receptionist said after he left. He didn't even fight back. But now, looking back on everything that's unfolded, the collapse of Warren and Blake, the rise of Project Soil, the lives changed, the truths exposed, I realize something I didn't understand then. Sometimes, walking away is the loudest fight there is. A year has passed since that night at the Avalon Grand. 12 months since the hotel lobby became a battlefield. Since I wrote the blog post that started as a whisper and ended as a siren. Since Elijah quietly ignited a chain reaction that would tear down one system and help build another. Now, I stand in a sunlit courtyard on Chicago's South Side. The red bricks of the old textile mill have been polished, repainted, and reimagined. Overhead banners read, "Project Soil, innovation grows here." Inside, the hum of possibility fills every corner. Startups. Mentors. Investors. Community leaders. Students. And in the center of it all, David Jackson. David no longer walks with the weight of proving himself. He no longer avoids Elijah's shadow. He stands in it, then extends it, casting shelter over the next generation. He's helped fund over 90 new businesses in the past year. And not just tech. Grocers. Bookstores. Clinics. Clean energy projects. Companies started by people who had ideas, but never access. Access. That was always the real battle, wasn't it? Not talent. Not effort. Just access. David's mother, Gloria, now serves as Chief Operating Officer of the Project Soil Foundation. I call her the engine behind closed doors, because she runs everything. Budgets. Hiring. Vision strategy. And she still makes time to bring coffee to interns every morning at 8 o'clock sharp. She always brings me a black one, no cream, no sugar. "How you take it," she says. Strong, real, and a little bitter when necessary. I think of my grandfather every time she says that. He would have loved her. Ava Johnson, now based in Sao Paulo, dials in every Friday to give updates from her global fund, Project Soil's international sister program. They've funded 14 new companies across Brazil, Nigeria, and Vietnam this quarter alone. Last month, she gave a speech at the UN about ethical capital and the future of inclusive funding. They gave her a standing ovation. She cried. Not because of the applause, but because Elijah had once told her. One day, they'll listen to us not out of guilt, but out of respect. And they finally had. And then there's Leia. Once the daughter of the empire. Now, the one rebuilding its bones. Under her leadership, WNB has been renamed Roe and Warren Ventures, in honor of the man who exposed the cracks and the daughter who chose to fix them. Some people called it a PR move. I know better. I've watched her every week, making decisions that no one sees on camera. Revising contracts. Forgiving debts. Calling the former founders not to apologize, but to ask what they need now. That's real reform. Not in the spotlight. In the structure. As for me, I'm no longer an intern. I run Clarity Journal, a growing media platform that focuses on accountability reporting, especially in finance and business. We're not big. But we're honest. We don't chase clicks. We chase questions. Like, why are certain people never funded? Why do some neighborhoods always get left out? Who benefits from the way normal works? People say I'm brave. But bravery, I've learned, is just truth with a microphone. This morning, a delivery arrived at our office. A heavy, wrapped box with no return label. Inside, a book. Leather-bound. Worn edges. Title engraved in faded gold. Lessons I couldn't teach fast enough. Elijah's journal. The original. Not a copy. Not a quote. The book. Taped to the inside cover, a note. Chloe. For every story you told with care. For every lie you made, tremble. For every truth you set free. I started this. You carried it. Now let others hold the light too. E. I wept. For the first time in months. Not from grief. From homecoming. That night, we held the legacy gala in Elijah's honor. Not a funeral. A replanting. We filled the old Union Theater with people who had once been invisible. Founders. Students. Journalists. Factory workers. People who had been laughed out of banks. Shut out of boardrooms. Overlooked, overqualified, over it. They sat in seats once reserved for elites. And they rose when Elijah's name was called. I stood on that stage, trembling in heels that still felt too big. I read a passage from his journal. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you give away before you go. It's not the empire you build. It's the bridge you leave behind for others to cross. The applause shook the rafters. But what stayed with me most was what came after, when the lights dimmed and one woman approached me slowly. Older. Wrinkles deep. Eyes bright. She reached for my hand. My granddaughter reads your work, she said. She started her own business because of what y'all did. Then she looked at me like I was someone she'd waited her whole life to meet. You didn't just tell a story, baby. You reminded us we were still in it. That night, I walked home in the cold with my scarf pulled high and my fingers stiff in my coat. And I felt, for the first time in years, like maybe. Just maybe. We weren't fighting for a future anymore. We were finally walking in it. So when people ask me what Elijah Rowe's legacy is, I don't say, $1 billion exit. I don't say, corporate reform. I don't even say, Project Soil. I say, a man walked into a hotel. They laughed at his card. They questioned his worth. And he made a call, not just to the markets, but to us. And we answered. And that was enough to start a new world. Legacy isn't about money, it's about meaning. The story of Elijah Rowe reminds us that true power doesn't always wear a title or come with applause. Sometimes, it walks quietly into a room, gets dismissed, and still changes the world without raising its voice. This story wasn't just about taking down corruption, it was about lifting the truth. About standing firm when others bend. About choosing dignity over ego, and purpose over pride. What we build in silence can echo louder than any speech, if it's built on integrity. What we protect with patience becomes the foundation for those who come after us. And when we choose to pass the torch rather than keep the fire to ourselves, that's when real legacy begins. In a world that often tells us we're too small to matter, Elijah, David, Leah, and Chloe proved otherwise. They remind us that courage isn't loud. It's consistent. And that justice isn't a moment, it's a movement. If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes that values matter. That change is possible. That the future isn't something we inherit, it's something we build, together. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories that honor truth, legacy, and the quiet strength that reshapes the world.